Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahawashi, Bahasham, Barakahak Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahawashi. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who ruled and teach well. In peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the Brother Ra'aya with another video, and in this video, I'll be profiling an article on Newsweek.com titled, Israel, who for the rest of the video I'll be referring to as the 1948ers, sends message to Iran and Hezbollah in first ever U.S. Army drill. And hey, this is biblical prophecy continuing to take place right before our very eyes, which is what we'll get into after we read a little bit of this article. The 1948er Defense Forces, IDF, has sent a message to Iran and its regional partners, including Lebanon's Hezbollah, with the first ever joint training between the 1948er and U.S. armies. The drill was part of a massive 2-week IDF series of exercises known as Firm Hand that wrapped up Wednesday, which simulated an all-out conflict. It came amid heightened tensions with Iran, which recently previewed a new hypersonic missile, and Hezbollah, which possesses its own stockpile of precision-guided munitions. And best believe there will be an all-out war involving the U.S. and the 1948ers on one side, and Iran and her allies, such as Russia and China, on the other. And it's going to play into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon, in Joel chapter 3. But let's get into a few precepts. This is Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 20. Therefore, hear the counsel of Yahweh that he hath taken against Edom. And the biblical Edomites are known today as these so-called white people, which these Americans, these so-called white Americans are, and those 1948ers over in the Holy Land are. They're Amalekite Edomites, and his purposes that he hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. And the least of the flock is talking about those Amalekite Edomites over in the Holy Land in that Middle Eastern region. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them, and the least of the flock shall surely draw them out. Those 1948ers are going to do something to foment a war against Iran, which is going to drag in on their side the U.S. and those other NATO nations, and like I said earlier, on the side of Iran, Russia, China, and her other allies. And the fact that we're seeing, as it said in that article, first ever public joint military drills involving the 1948ers and the U.S. shows that this prophecy is quickly coming to its fulfillment. This is Joel chapter 2, verse 20. But I will remove far off from you the Northern Army, the North American Army, the United States military, all branches, the Army, the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, etc., etc., and will drive him into a land barren and desolate, that Middle Eastern region, and more specifically, Saudi Arabia, which is going to be the main staging ground for this battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, with his face toward the East Sea. And when we go to a map of the Middle East, we've got Saudi Arabia right there, which the U.S. has a military presence in. And what do you have to the east? The Persian Gulf. And what's above it? Iran, the main target of the U.S. and the 1948ers in that Middle Eastern region. Look up the Oded Yinon plan, which came out back in the 80s, which dealt with the 1948ers weakening all these other Middle Eastern countries so they would be the sole power that no country could stand up to. And then look at that speech that General Wesley Clark of the U.S. made back in, I believe, 2002, where it said the U.S. would attack, I think it was 7 countries in 5 years, and they said that they were going to end it off with Iran. And then to the northeast, you've got Iraq with the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And the U.S. has a military presence there. And also you've got Syria next to Iraq, which the U.S. has a military presence in. The Most High has kept the U.S. military in that Middle Eastern region over the last couple of decades so they can be more easily prepared to mobilize when the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat kicks off and to be drawn out by the least of the flock, those 1948ers starting a war with Iran. And his hinder part, or behind him toward the utmost sea, the Red Sea, and what's above the Red Sea, you've got the Holy Land. And his stink shall come up, and his ill savor shall come up, because he hath done great things. Hey, to you U.S. military personnel and a lot of you other heathen militaries that are going to be drawn out by the least of the flock into that Middle Eastern region, hey, you better come to terms with that being your final resting place, because that's going to be a great slaughter of heathen militaries during the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Now I'm going to go to Ezekiel chapter 38. I'm going to start at verse 1. And the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, which is the biblical name for Russia, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth. And that's the Most High putting that old confrontational Soviet Union spirit back onto those Russians who are Edomites as well, which we can clearly see with their military operation in Ukraine and the fact that they helped Bashar al-Assad during the Syrian civil war to help him fight against, ISIS, which was nothing more than a military proxy mercenary force by the U.S., the 1948ers, and other Western nations. Ultimately, they're going to be brought forth into the Middle Eastern region for the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which Russia already has a presence in that region. Again, they helped Bashar al-Assad during the Syrian civil war, so they have military assets there. And just recently, Russia has been building up political, economic, and I believe military ties with Sudan, which is on the other side of the Red Sea by Saudi Arabia. And I will bring thee forth and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, their military might, soldiers, tanks, artillery pieces, fighter jets, helicopters, the S-300, the S-400, those hypersonic missiles, you name it. But here's the main point I wanted to get to. Persia, which is the ancient name for Iran, Ethiopia, and Libya with them. And of course, we know that Russia has ties with Iran, but if you look up these different countries, Russia is also building up or has ties with those countries as well. With them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer, which is speaking of Turkey, which we know Russia and Turkey have heavy ties, and all his bands. The house of Togarmah of the North Quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee. Hey, all these nations that are going to fight on the side of Russia and Iran during the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company, or thy allies that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Russia is going to be a guard unto these smaller nations against the Western powers, and the very first nation that was mentioned was Iran. So like I've been saying, when the least of the flock foments that war against Iran and draws in her allies, the Northern Army or the U.S. military and those other NATO nations in, it's going to draw in Gog, China, and these other nations in on the side of Iran to play into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And again, articles like this clearly show that with each passing day, we're getting closer and closer to these major biblical prophecies come to their fulfillment. Remember, they said that this was a first ever joint training drill between the 1948er and U.S. armies. The 1948ers have always been under a lot of threats from all around. 1948er Major Dov Lang, commander of the IDF's 7th Armored Brigade that took part in the exercises, told Newsweek, and the 1948ers are always ready for anything that's coming. And I think the U.S. has seen the strength and capability of the 1948er Army, he added. And I think the fact that the U.S. Army came here just strengthens our alliance and our trust in the U.S. Army. In fact, Lang said that the main goal of the drill, which involves U.S. Army Central Command, ARCENT, and its Task Force Spartan, was to demonstrate the power of the alliance to the world. But perhaps even more importantly, Lang said the two armies got the opportunity to learn from one another and identify challenges in crossing technological, doctrinal, and even language gaps between the longtime allies. Among the key training elements he identified was urban warfare tactics. The most important thing that I got was the trust and the knowledge that, if needed, then we can fight together, Lang said. The broader firm hand exercises also encompass units of the 1948ers Air Force, Navy, and cyber units as part of a multi-front war scenario. And not just the branches of the 1948er military, but what? I will remove far off from you the Northern Army, all branches of the U.S. military getting gathered down. The exercise will test the IDF's readiness for an intense, prolonged campaign in a multitude of arenas. An IDF statement read, active duty and reserve troops from all commands, all branches, and all directorates will participate in the exercise. They will train in handling challenges and developing events in a number of arenas simultaneously. That's it with this article. You get the point. But hey, as we can clearly see, biblical prophecy continues to take place right before our very eyes. And the fact that this was a first ever joint training drill between the 1948ers and U.S. armies shows that we are at the door of the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon, kicking off. But now let's go to Joel chapter 3. I'm going to start at verse 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, the heathen Gentiles, prepare war against Iran, World War III, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon, nuclear war, because this war will go nuclear. Wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Which we're seeing an example of with these with the 1948er and U.S. armies conducting joint military drills, the firm hand to prepare for what? All-out conflict involving all branches of both their militaries. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say I am strong. And an example of this is Iran recently unveiling their hypersonic missile, the Fatah, saying that, look, it can reach the 1948ers. And they also are saying they're strong because they know that whenever a war starts between them and the 1948ers, who's going to come to their aid? Gog, Russia. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen. The United States, the 1948ers, Iran, Russia, China, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, these other NATO nations, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Yahweh, and those mighty ones are the death angels of the Most High, holding back this great destruction, waiting to get the go-ahead to release it. And that's mainly going to happen after the Charagma, the Markothbeast in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 18, which is the RFID/NFC MICROCHIPIMPLANT is mandatorily implemented. And that's a main indicator to know that once that mandatory implementation takes place, that's when this war is going to fully kick off and go full-blown hot and then nuclear. And we can see that that rollout and eventual mandatory implementation of the Charagma is right around the corner as well. You're hearing more and more talks about the CHIP in the news. And then what else? Neuralink, that BCI from Elon Musk, has gotten FDA approval. So that Charagma in the hand and in the forehead. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, which in the Hebrew is Yahweh's Shabbat, which means Yahweh's judgment. And when you go up to the first couple of verses of this chapter, you'll see why the Most High is gathering these heathens down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, to judge them for afflicting the apple of his eye, the children of Israel, the true children of Israel, who are known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. And when you go to Psalms chapter 83, you will see that the Edomites are at the top of the list of those nations that confederated themselves against the nation of Israel to cut them off from their identity. And then also it mentions the Amalekites as well. So it mentions Esau 2 times. 2 times the affliction on the children of Israel, 2 times the judgment you're going to receive. For there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of Yahweh is near in the valley of decision. And we can clearly see that the day of Yahweh is very near in the valley of decision. So that's it with this video. With this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babol, Kwam Yasharallah, and until next time, Shalom.